Morning, everyone. Welcome to Ask the Advisor. So, as usual, our panelists will share their background about water management and irrigation. Then we'll move into a Q&A section at the end. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask them directly, preferably at the end if you're planning on unmuting. Our meetings are held roughly monthly on Wednesday mornings. We're looking at July 29th for the next meeting as of right now. So our panelists, Bruno, Pitton, and Gerry Spinelli will introduce themselves now.
Great. Thanks, Gerry. So I'm Bruno Pitton. I'm an environmental horticulture advisor with UC Cooperative Extension. I'm in Placer and Nevada counties, but I've done a lot of work with the nursery industry, where I was at UC Davis as a researcher. And so just going to talk a little bit about, some things that we should consider for our water management at our nurseries. So, thinking about water recycling systems, right? These are really common in California due to regulations of needing to maintain our runoff water on site, as well as for some locations, it's really a valuable source of water when we capture that water that we've already paid for. There's a lot of components that go into these, including multiple ponds and runoff channels and treatment. And so just thinking about that, and like to, I've conducted this case study quite a few years ago with a nursery in Southern California. And what we found is that, recycling water can save money. They were paying $1,000 roughly per acre foot, and they were using about 1,000 acre feet. And then when they actually captured and recycled that water that didn't end up in the plant in the pots, that water cost about $400 an acre foot, right? Which is significantly cheaper. And so they saved a lot of money by recycling that water. And a couple things are the majority of the cost in recycled water is based on that system infrastructure. Because you have to build that system to start, which there's a lot of upfront capital costs. And it also depends on the cost of your water, right? If you're in Southern California and you're paying $1,000 to $2,000 per acre foot, it makes a lot more sense to capture and recycle that water than if you're maybe in Northern California where you're paying $50 an acre foot. And the other thing is since a lot of the cost is associated with that infrastructure, the more water you use, that means the lower the recycled water price ends up being over time. And then thinking about as we capture and recycle our water is, what is testing, right? Like, what do we need to measure for, and then getting into treatment. So here's just a water quality report from a nursery. And, one thing that sticks out here in their tap water is their pH is really high. And they need to adjust that. And then if we had some recycled water, we'd likely get into some possibly some salinity issues, depending on where we're located, or our source water to start, and and how to deal with that. And so, like, why are some reasons we would treat our water? pH. I'm going to talk about particles and debris in our water, and I'll talk a little bit about pathogens. Right, so pH, we're trying to optimize our nutrient availability. And, the pH for our soil substrates, we want it to be somewhere between 5.5 and 6.3 for maximum nutrient availability. And then also to help reduce alkalinity and, hard water deposits, right? Things that are clogging that can, clog our systems. And so, we're potentially a good way to do that, to neutralize that alkalinity, is to inject acid. One important thing also is particles, right? If we're capturing and recycling water, or if we have, maybe some irrigation ditch water that we're using from our irrigation district, we might have a lot of particles in that water, and these can be organic matter, they can be soil particles. And those all decrease the effectiveness of our sanitizing agents, whether it's chlorine, ozone, or UV. And so, these organic matter, again, potting substrates, if we have a lot of algae in our water, these also can clog irrigation systems. And soil particles can wear out our irrigation system components. You know, as if you think about all these little, clay and sand particles that are passing through our irrigation system and, being emitted by our sprinklers, they can, wear out those components like the nozzles and make them bigger than they are supposed to, and then they don't perform correctly. They can clog drip emitter systems. And so we want to use something like these slow sand filters here, to remove those particles from that water. And this is especially important to do before we treat for pathogens. And we can use chemical agents like chlorine, ozone, hydrogen peroxide, or copper ionization. We can use UV light filters. And then there's some other technology called slow sand filters, which are actually or more common in Europe than here. And they're a biological filtration system that has a biological layer that actually kills pathogens as the water is passing through. And so those are just some things that thought might be interesting and worth talking about and thinking about before, and maybe prompt some questions from you. And that's all I have. So I'm gonna stop sharing. Well, Gerry's up.
Hello, I am Gerry Spinelli, and I am the advisor for nurseries and floriculture in San Diego for another 2 weeks. So if you want to use me fast. And if you've never used me, wait another 2 weeks until you crack that champagne bottle. And it's been an honor to serve you. And today, it's my honor to follow up on what Bruno said and reiterate some of the points that he made. And this is a little bit we mean these presentations at the beginning like as teasers, right? So we can put a lot of topics on the table, and so then you can ask your questions. This is an ask the advisor. So it's not about us telling you things. It's about you asking things to us. But we do this presentation so we can tell you a little bit of many things that if you're interested, you can ask us. And I put things on the table by showing you pictures. So what's in your pond? What kind of ponds can you have out there where you collect your runoff water? What's in your runoff? Does it look like a chocolate shake? Does it have a lot of perlite in it? Does it have a lot of algae in it? Certainly, it will have sand or sediment, and by sediment we mean clay and silt particles that gives the color of chocolate shake. It may have perlite that float on the surface, so it doesn't sink. It's more it's you need a specific treatment with baffles to remove it, to skim it from the top of the surface. It may have nitrate that is very soluble, and neonicotinoids are very soluble pesticides, so they go with the water, and that's opposed to phosphorus and pyrethroids that instead tend to stick to sediment. So by getting rid of that sediment on a sedimentation pond, you get rid of most of the phosphorus fertilizer and the pyrethroids that are stuck to that sediments, and then you need different treatments at the end to remove nitrate or neonicotinoids. But Bruno and I are standing on the shoulders of the giants because my friend John Kabashima and my friend Darren Haver, Dr. Kabashima and Dr. Haver, back in the day here in Irvine at El Modino Nursery, they showcased all the treatments that you can do and you should do. And the main point is that, like Bruno said, rarely only one treatment would work. And Bruno and I have seen a lot of failures with people saying, "Oh, I've got a lot of runoff water. I'm gonna put it in a pond, and then I'm gonna use UV, and I'm gonna reuse it." And generally, the UV machine is not gonna work well if you have a lot of algae, if you have a lot of organic matter, if you have a lot of sediment in that water. So you need at least to get rid of that sediment in a sedimentation pond. And if you have a pressurized system like Bruno showed, you can use sand media filters. But if it's a surface runoff system that is not pressurized, you will need to use a sediment trap or a sedimentation pond. And this you can scan this code to download this presentation from John and Darren that they sent me maybe 6 years ago, and now I guess I'm the gatekeeper of this presentation, so I want to share it with all of you. And this is the work again that they did at El Modino. After that, there was I think, a lawsuit with the regional board. These are some pictures of a really good example of sand traps, very well constructed with reinforced concrete, and they're made in a way that you can go there with a front load and clean them up. So this is a great example of a great effort that this nursery is doing. They're really good at building these structures. They're a little less good at maintaining them clean. Of course, if it's full of sediment like it is now, it won't work. And it fills up with sediment because it does this job, right? It does its job. The water comes here and it sits there, and the level goes up until it spills out from these pipes here, right? So if it's full of sediment, it doesn't collect any sediment anymore. But these are very good examples with this ramp for a front load to clean up. And then your pond, after that you've got rid of the sand and of the sediment, can be lined or unlined. And the reason why we're so intense about getting rid of that sediment is that if you don't get rid of that sediment and of that sand before the pond, then it'll settle inside the pond, and it will be really difficult to clean it, particularly if it's lined, because you cannot send a backhoe on it to dig up that sediment, or you'll damage the lining. And this is a picture from the same nursery that Bruno mentioned earlier, that whose name shall remain untold. But my friend Carlos came up with this idea of putting the canna lilies that again comes from Darren's and John's job. And they're called vegetation filters, and the idea is that you have some growing plants that in that water that picks up the sediment, uses the fertilizer, and also evaporates some of the water. And it really looks nice for also your PR, right? So some journalist will come to your nursery and interview you about how cool is this flowers that you're growing to improve your water quality, and the water quality regulators will be really happy. It's from a visual from a communication point of view, it works really well. And with this is my contact information. Call me or email me, and I hope that we put some issues on the table that you can ask some questions about. And if not, I can also go on and talk about all the things that I usually talk about with pressure and irrigation, and how to reduce your runoff, and how to measure your pressure, and all those boring things that I've told you a million times, and that Bruno wanted me to talk about.
So far, the only question in the chat is, Gerry, what's happening after 2 weeks?
Well, let's follow up offline, Kyron.
Thanks.
Anyway, it's public information now. I got another job, so yeah, I'll be leaving in 2 weeks. But it's been an honor to work with you, Kyron.
I have a question. The water lilies, that was what was in the runoff
Canna
in that
lilies.
slide, right? Yeah, so were there any measurements taken before and after the water went through that to see if there was any difference in like nutrient concentration of the water?
Darren and John did in that
Okay.
presentation at El Modino. I don't know if this particular nursery they're doing that. Maybe Bruno or Kyron knows. But the idea is that you reduce so you reduce nitrate because the plant picks it up, probably you will reduce phosphorus if it's still in the water if the plant picks it up. The roots provide surfaces for things to stick to, so it also picks up sediment that it's running in that water. And then what else, Bruno?
Well, the other thing is, you can actually grow those there and divide them and sell them as well, right? So there, some added benefit to having those near. I think one of the questions we have though, right, is like how many of those do you actually need to make a difference? And I'm not sure that we're really, I don't remember Darren's work well enough at this point to know what that number is. There's also potential that, for ponds, you can put in a floating treatment wetland, which is, some other water loving plants that are out there floating on an island of plants in your pond. And if you cover enough area, it really helps because you can block light so you can reduce algae growth. And then it also is doing all these things that Gerry talked about too, which is, taking up, plant nutrients and, doing some water purification. Yes. So, yeah, Duncan, go ahead.
Yeah, the canna lilies, they work really well because they thrive in that aquatic or moist environment for one thing. At Cal Poly Pomona, we've built some artificial wetlands and planted different vegetation to do just that. And I remember going way back, there was a guy, Dr. Lyon or something, that actually had this mobile artificial wetland to take around and demonstrate. I don't know if any of you remember that. It's been at least 10 or more years ago. It's kind of about the time that I first met Dr. Milano and some of the others. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of potential with that. And somebody mentioned you could even end up dividing them and selling them. Yeah, I think that's a good approach.
So this is Darren's presentation for what it's worth. John, Dr. Kabashima and Dr. Haver presentations with you see, this is what they did. Again, they put these canna lilies in this ditch. And this
Yeah, I
is the
remember John talking about that years ago and giving some when he was early on working on some of this stuff. So I think it's a really good approach.
and you see most of the suspended solids that basically sediment, it drops at the pond
Mhm.
like it should. But then they think they show something else that you see the permethrin keeps dropping through the canna lilies to I don't remember who asked about if they measured or how much they measured of the effectiveness of the canna lilies. But for example, this is an example of epirethroids that gets reduced, not completely removed, but substantially reduced through those 50 feet of canna lilies.
Gerry, what's the x-axis? Is that feet?
Concentration of permethrin.
No, that's the y-axis, but what about the x-axis?
I'm sorry, it's the distance in feet.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah. So this is where the pond is, and they measured the distance in feet, and they sampled the water at these different spots, and they said, oh, at 166 feet from the pond, the concentration was this high. At 210, it dropped this much, right? And this is where they were going through the canna lilies ditch. That is this one.
Yeah, and so what we know is these, pyrethroids, they bind well to suspended solids, so sediments. And then if you think about if you had these, pyrethroids still in your irrigation water and then you were applying that as overhead irrigation water to your crops, I wonder if that would maybe have some negative effect on your, or increased insecticide resistance potentially for your pests. Because right, that's one of the major problems and one of the reasons we end up with these, these resistant pests to our pesticides is that we're applying too low a concentration and it doesn't kill them right away. And so if you had this really low concentration that you were constantly applying, I wonder if they would potentially develop resistance to that. Yeah. Yeah, is there more questions from the audience?
Bruno, we also have that poll that you put together
Yep.
if you'd like me to send that out.
That would be great. Let's do the first poll question. Yeah, so what is your main source of irrigation water, right? Is it coming from a well, untreated irrigation district water, right? So that's, maybe some surface water source that doesn't get treated before it gets to you. Is it surface water? Is it, from a pond? Is it treated municipal water? Or not sure. I guess not applicable is maybe you don't irrigate. Not sure how many nursery growers don't have irrigation water.
Well, and also what's the quality of that water, right? What came to mind when Bruno showed the water analysis with 0.24 decisiemens per meter of salinity, you ain't gonna get that in San Diego. I'll guarantee you that. They get that kind of water up in Riverside, maybe from Eastern. I don't know where they get it, but I know we don't get it. And so another of the things that Bruno touched on that you could ask is when you recycle that water, at every cycle your salinity increases because the runoff picks up stuff as it moves, because you add fertilizer every time you reuse it, and so there should be some management when you reuse the water from your pond. You should measure the EC, the electrical conductivity, and it's not unusual to reblend that water with municipal water, to reblend the treated pond water with expensive municipal water to drop the electrical conductivity. Oh, a lot of well people. Okay. You guys are blessed.
Yeah, right. And so well water is good in that we don't have pathogen issues in our well water. And so we don't necessarily need to treat with, chlorine or ozone or something similar to remove those pathogens or sanitize that water. But we can have, solutes in there like, bicarbonates or other ions, sodium and chloride that we don't necessarily want to apply. Or in certain places in California, we might even have a lot of nitrates in that water, which is not good for drinking water, but is great for irrigation water, right? Because that's a major end source, nitrogen source for, our growing plants. And then those who have treated municipal water too, that's another really nice source. However, it can get costly, right? So typically with our treated municipal water, it's gone through a filtration process, and then there's a chlorination process, so that we can drink it and not get sick. And then that also, makes it so there's no plant pathogens in there. It's the same chlorination that, kills the things that we don't want to drink, also kills the stuff that, we don't want to expose our plants to. I think
And
we could end
also,
that
I
poll
guess
now.
on that list for us in San Diego is also relevant. We get recycled municipal water also. The purple, what we call the purple pipe. And so for that, if you irrigate with that specific water, be careful because it has higher salinity and typically higher sodium and chlorides than the municipal water. So it's a little cheaper. It's a little cheaper, but for how crappy it is, it should be cheaper, right? So it's not, it's not a good deal. It's not a good deal, but sometimes you're forced to use it. But even more if you're using recycled municipal water, you really should keep an eye on your salinity and specifically on your chlorides and on your sodium. Every time that they're above 100, 150 ppm, you should be careful.
Sam, can you pull up the next poll question? How frequently do you test your irrigation water? Is that the this one?
So I think the way that it works is that it should go through the questions as people work through them. Let's see. You can share the results.
Yeah, but I only had that one question. The
Oh,
first,
okay.
I don't know. Can you share more results then?
No, you need to scroll down, Bruno. I think that they were all wrapped up into one.
Oh, okay. There we go. So, how about the next question? How do you treat your irrigation water?
I may have ended the poll by accident. Sorry about that.
All right, you want to open it up again? It's easy. Let's go there. So a lot of people don't treat the irrigation water, and that makes sense because we had a lot of people using either this high quality well water, hopefully, or um, or they were on municipal water. And so all the reasons we talked about is, helps explain why people aren't necessarily needing to treat that water. And, that municipal water, right, as Gerry kind of talked about, is we pay a lot for that. Um, and it can get really costly, especially if your, water sources, if, when you think about like compared to me at my house where I'm using, maybe 1,000 gallons a month or something, right? We're using maybe, tens of acres of feet a month, right? And so that adds up really fast.
So we have one person that uses a combination of the above. So whoever you are, congratulations. You're doing it right.
So how about what's the third one here? Yeah, so a lot of people aren't recycling. So I guess my question is, for the audience is, if there's not much recycling going on, and why is that? Does anyone want to chime in and say? So Duncan, you have your hand up.
Sure. I mean, at Cal Poly, we use both municipal water, recycled water, well water. And over the years, we spent a tremendous amount of money, more than 300,000 just going back, up to like 5 or more years ago on installing like precision application on like micro sprinklers and careful application methods, and so we've reduced our runoff to very little, if any. Um,
Hmm.
our storm, and we use a lot of best management practices to make sure that when there's precipitation events that we're not running off stormwater and things of that nature. We've really put a lot of effort into it.
And so how are you guys, you said precision irrigation, that's like drip irrigation directly into the pot?
Well, I mean, we farm 1,550 acres. We have multiple growing operations all the way from big citrus and avocado groves to we're doing field crops. And then we also have greenhouses. We have 7 4,500 foot greenhouses, and then we have nursery operations in containers. So ours is pretty diversified about what we're doing. In the field crops, at one point when I arrived there in 1988, we were doing flood irrigation on some of these, like on one of these citrus fields, and we cut that out like it's probably 15, 20 years ago or more. And we've installed like 2 or 3 of these micro sprinklers out close to the drip line of like the citrus.
So
And
what are you guys doing in your container crops?
What's that?
How are you applying irrigation to your container crops? Because right, these are the more challenging.
Well, like the 5 gallon containers, we're using like the Roberts emitters, the spot spitters, with the poly pipe. And, I keep pushing them for controllers, even in the areas where we don't have power. I'm using those 100 nodes that they may have an updated one, but a lot of them are 3 stations. And so then you just kind of watch the weather ahead of time, and then you can make these adjustments to them because you can do percentage up to like 200% and down below 50%, and you can turn them off during rain events. Um, so, on the 1 gallons, we're doing some overhead, like either gear driven rotors or rainbird impact heads. Um, we don't have much of that going on. And then the greenhouses, we just got this irrigation boom. We're going to start growing like 1,500 vegetable plugs per week for food bank people that are growing out for food banks here in Orange County. That just arrived yesterday or the day before, and the guys are installing it. And I mean, this thing, you can have a whole 4,500-foot greenhouse, and you can program this thing to do precision irrigation based on the water requirements of the specific crop. I mean, we're
So,
we're we're really trying to push the envelope as using the latest technology, and both on water savings and on water runoff.
yeah. So, right, our problem with containers, as everyone here probably recognizes, is that, there's a lot of empty space between them. So that overhead irrigation, right, we have poor interception efficiency, especially depending on how much we're spacing those. As they're spaced out more, right, there's more empty area there, and then they intercept less of that irrigation water, which can generate a lot of runoffs. Um, and then, thinking about how we manage salts, in order to reduce the salinity of our soil substrate solution, right? The water in our potting soil, we need to leach out those salts. And we need to do that more frequently with a greater amount as we have saltier water than if we have really clean water, right? And that includes our fertilizer salts, right? Because plants are very selective about what they take up, and they don't always take up everything we're giving them. Could we go to the next poll question, Sam?
Yeah, sorry about that. I had to relaunch the poll, but if you want to look in the chat, there's the results from the first round of it.
Okay. Says not meeting host, no response collected.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, here, let me see.
Maybe you could pull it up and share.
Yeah.
Cool.
If there are questions from the audience, we can.
Yep. Yeah, we'd love more questions from everyone.
Let people unmute themselves and don't be shy and ask us.
Yeah, I know Bruno asked the question why not many people are recirculating the water, right? So it's I think the key remark is the investment needed to catch all the water, all the runoffs and those kind of issues in different locations, and then what kind of treatment do we need to do to secure the quality of the water. I think those are the two main ones, like investments, runoff, channeling the water to to the catchment, and then treating them.
Yeah, so it's that cost involved, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And the return on investment of that cost is not always there.
And then in addition to that, there's the challenge that sometimes the land is not yours. So it's an investment that maybe is not even on something that remain yours. And sometimes even if the land is not yours, you still be willing to do the investment, but they don't let you. And up in LA, it's a great example of that, where all these nurseries underneath the power lines, they cannot touch the property by contract. So circumstances that limit the capture and reuse of water.
And so what happens go ahead,
Yeah.
Gerry.
So currently, actually, we are looking at an investment in one of our facilities in Fallbrook to look at water recycling process. So that's going to be a big, project management process this year.
Could you share how much you were paying for that water at that facility? You're willing to share?
I don't have the overview myself, but if I throw a number, it won't be right. But I think we are just starting to look at it. Last year, we did an intern from Cal Poly did look at some of those, and then we have a project manager, external project manager coming in to work it out.
But you'll be, anywhere in San Diego County, you'll be in the realm of $2,000 per acre foot. That's what we pay down here. So it'll be a little cheaper if you get municipal recycled water. And I know up in Fallbrook, some nurseries do. But that's the price in San Diego County, unless you have a well, right? But then typically the well is also salty, so you need to put it through reverse osmosis. It's unusual for us to have a well that doesn't have salty water. Some people a little bit on the eastern side of the county, closer to the mountains.
What's the price difference like for that recycled municipal water versus the higher quality? Gerry? No.
Not as cheap as you would think. It's still expensive.
Okay.
Still expensive.
Cool. Yeah. Well, are there any more questions from the audience? Be nice to hear from someone else rather than just hear Gerry and I talking, right?
Any smaller grower that maybe has maybe doesn't have a lot of capital investment is interested in say, okay, what's the minimum I can do? I'm currently discharging into don't tell the water quality regulators, but I'm currently discharging into the surface waters. What can I do? Well, now I said that nobody's gonna open their mouth. But again, I guess I'm gonna answer my own question. A lot of
Hey, Gerry,
Go ahead.
question.
Sorry, go ahead.
How do you determine how big of a reclamation pond or something you need?
Oh, that's a very good question. So it has to do with the gallons per minute that you produce that are not very easy to measure. You will need a flume, and then so there will be some flow rate that comes in, some gallons per minute that comes in, and then you will need some gallons per minute that come out, right? You need to do something with that water. In San Diego, where I'm at, a lot of some people reuse it for irrigation. Some people let it just evaporate. Some people repump it just to get rid of it. It's very common to repump it to irrigate a landscape around the nursery. Oh, we have some pepper trees here between the property and our neighbors. We put a drip line and we irrigate those. So you need to calculate the flow rate coming in and the flow rate coming out, and you will not be able to repump it at the same time. And so depending on those two variables, you can size what's the storage that you need, and that will determine how big your pond is.
Okay.
So
I don't know if it helps.
Sorry, Gerry, you want to finish?
I just want to say hi to Chris. What's up,
Oh, yeah.
Chris?
Hi, Jay.
Yeah. Hey, Chris. So I just added a tool that we created when I was working on the project, looking at runoff from nurseries, and we created a runoff estimator tool. Um, and I just put the link in the chat, and so that can help you calculate the amount of runoff that you would generate, and so how big your pond needs to be, right? And so there's a couple questions too. Is like, you know, are you just trying to capture the runoff from your irrigation water so that you can treat it? Are you trying to capture some amount of storm runoff? I think the regulation in California is still, you need to, and I think it might depend on your regional water quality control board. But I think the number I've heard is like half an inch. The first half inch of the storm is what you have to capture. But Gerry's saying no, and again,
Well, it depends where you're at. Back in the day in Ventura, they used to say that you need to capture that first flush of storm water, which kind of makes sense because the first flush is gonna pick up everything that was put there, including fertilizer and pesticides for the whole year, for the whole dry season that we had. So and Bruno is right. The quantity that you had to capture was anywhere between a half and 1 inch. But in San Diego it's not that way. So as long as it's runoff, as long as it's stormwater runoff, you can just let it flush right into the ocean.
So it depends on your regional water quality control.
Depends where you're at. Yeah.
And I don't know what the Central Valley Board is requiring at this point. I think it may have been used to be a half inch, but again, my numbers might not be correct.
I don't think they enforce that anymore. They're too busy thinking about A minus R and all these things.
Yeah, but so that's the question, right? It's like how much do you need to capture? And then, you can, if you're just trying to capture your runoff that you're, from your irrigation so you can recycle it, capture all those plant nutrients that you've applied, then, then that's a less volume than capturing a storm runoff, right? Yeah.
How does this affect nitrogen management planning? And I mean, if we're capturing everything that we're putting down and there's already just such minimal amount leaving the pot anyways, does it completely negate nitrogen management planning?
Well, right. You mean negate as in that you shouldn't have to fill out the form?
Correct.
Yeah.
You're a dreamer. You're a dreamer.
Well, I think that discussion is happening at, hopefully happen soon, Chris. I know you've seen the talks that we've given at these nursery conferences and, kind of pushing, it seems that like maybe a best management practice approach would be, easiest for nurseries to comply with. The question is, what is the state board gonna require from nurseries? And that's still not necessarily clear. They do have this, second, there's the Ag Expert Panel that is a group of scientists who are advising the State Water Board on, maybe some steps to move forward. Gerry and I did present, some research and, to them this year, right? In January sometime, I think. Yeah. And so, I mean, in Maryland, what they do is they have a best management practice checklist. And so because their problem is, polluting the Chesapeake Bay, which is this, huge fishery. And with, phosphorus is a really big problem. And they've created all these dead zones, through this runoff pollution. And so what they do there for the nursery industry is, if you were to capture all your runoff from your nursery, then you're not generating any runoff that's going to pollute the Chesapeake, and so you don't have to do anything besides that, right? You're the best case scenario. I'm not sure what it's going to look like in California or if that were to happen. Yeah, so kind of rambled a little bit, but yeah, thanks for that. That's a good question. And I think, you know, the other thing is we think about how much we're spending on fertilizers. And I was talking to one nursery who said they had a $500,000 controlled release fertilizer budget. And then we think about how much of that is leaching out of our containers. You know, it seems like it would be worthwhile to capture as much of that as you can and reapply it and potentially reduce the amount of fertilizer you would have to apply to your plants.
Just to answer the question, as things stand now, we hope, Bruno and I hope that they will change, but as they are now, you cannot, or correct me, Bruno, if I'm wrong, but you cannot, it would be really hard for you to get a credit in terms of removed nitrogen if you repump that water and say you irrigate your landscape around your house, around your property or something, because you're not removing it. Julie, go ahead. You don't have to raise your hands. You can just unmute yourselves and ask your question.
Cool. Hi guys. Thanks for this opportunity just to ask questions. I don't really have a specific question. I just wanted to share some feedback about the kind of regulatory framework that we have here in Ventura County. So for other folks in the call, I'm Jody Schweitzer. I'm with the Farm Bureau of Ventura County, and I manage the coalition that operates here in Ventura County for Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program. And in terms of, I mean, I think everybody's pretty well versed in the nitrogen tracking and reporting and all of those requirements for primarily a groundwater focus. We've got kind of a more unique framework for surface water protection here in Ventura County, and that's through the TMDL requirements that were kind of revised in the ag order that was adopted here in the Los Angeles region at the end of 2023. And so in these requirements, it provides this framework for if you have water quality exceedance for nutrients, then or any other TMDL constituent, folks have to choose a compliance pathway. So they either would choose track 1, which means they would sample at the edge of their nursery or farm or ranch, and then have to report those results and say, I'm meeting this load allocation and I'm demonstrating that by my sampling. Or they would choose track 2, which is a implementation focused approach. And in that case, they work with a technical service provider like an NRCS staff person, an RCD staff person, or what the ag order defines as an equivalent professional expert who has these like specific qualifications. And then that person makes a recommendation for the nursery or the farmer ranch or whatnot. So there is no, there's no prescriptive requirement in our ag order, at least, to say you have to capture this type of this quantity of storm event, or it has to be capture focused or any kind of specific type of management practice. But the way the ag order is written is that it's going to lean on the expertise of this qualified person and really recognize that, your NRCS folks, your RCD, your UC Cooperative Extension, these are the people who know what's really going to work best, and that there isn't this one size fits all really approach that can work, that you really need a custom approach for every nursery or every operation. And so folks who are under those requirements, who choose track 2, they work with this technical service provider and they develop a plan. And that plan is going to say, are you going to put in a flow-based treatment or a capture-based treatment or a vegetative-based treatment, whatever it's going to be. What are the parameters and design of that? And then they submit that to the regional board. And then the regional board approves it on a case-by-case basis. And then that becomes their regulatory mandate, essentially, that they have to implement there. So just kind of, I know that everything is really different across the state and there are, efforts to standardize things. But when we're talking surface water issues, I think there's still a lot of variation across the state. So that's just, some fun challenges we have here in Ventura County, but LA County also has the same framework and a heavily nursery dominated industry.
Just
Thank you,
wanted to
Jody.
add. Go ahead, Bruno. Sorry.
I was just going to say thank you, Jody, for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you, Jody. I just wanted to add for everybody we're talking a little bit about everything, but you should have a very different approach for how you manage stormwater and for how you manage irrigation runoff. They're two different beasts. The stormwater is a lot of water in a very short amount of time. We're getting a 1 inch storm on a Thursday night between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. You're not there. You don't see it. You come back to the nursery the next morning. You see the effects of it. You see all this erosion. You didn't even see the runoff. It happened 6 hours ago while you were sleeping. It's a very concentrated, high flow rate event. Its management is based on preparedness. It's about the things that you do before when you know that on Thursday night we're going to get a storm. And we are in Mediterranean climate, so we know when the storm season is, right? And so we prepare for it. On the other hand, there is the irrigation runoff that is something that happens continuously, typically happens during the dry season because that's when we irrigate the most. And it's a very slow, low flow rate, continuous runoff that you get. And the problem is that they share the same infrastructure because those ditches is where water flows. And so depending on the season and depending on what kind of runoff you're managing, either irrigation or stormwater runoff, you need to implement different practices and prepare for these different kinds of runoff that you're going to get.
I see we have a question from Eileen in the chat about urban tree nurseries. And maybe we could clarify, these are like brand new nurseries. Eileen, would you mind coming off or unmuting yourself? And do you want to clarify some things? So are these brand new nurseries?
Hey, Bruno, what's up? Yeah, sorry, I've got a sick baby at home, but yes, they're new nurseries. They have been built, so it's not something that we can necessarily go back on a contract and require anything now. But there's one in San Francisco, and then there's one in Davis at the LA Moran Reforestation Center. That one is being built, so there's still kind of time but the contract's already in place. So I'm just wondering, as like technical assistance providers to grantees, setting grant guidelines with BMPs, is there a way to use this research to sort of, help them reduce their impact on urban water?
Yeah, so basically, how can we make them as like efficient as possible, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think there's definitely some things that you could implement as far as like, getting an irrigation system that's designed by someone who's, does this professionally, possibly doing some real world testing, like measuring irrigation uniformity. What do you have to add, Gerry?
Run whatever irrigation device you pick that you were going to use, run them at the right pressure.
Right. Yeah.
And measure the pressure.
Yeah.
And make sure that they're being run at what the manufacturer says they should be run. And as Bruno said, have a professional design your main lines and your laterals and your irrigation system.
Yeah, and I've seen some situations with some of these maybe smaller nurseries that are, doing, restoration projects or, not to blame anyone, but, there's a lot of like homemade systems out there. And those tend to not perform very well. And especially as, maybe this grows from a quarter acre to, 5 acres. We definitely, and our water use is increasing. We definitely want to make sure we get that design correct so that our irrigation systems, we're applying the amount of water that we need to for our plants, and we're reducing that runoff and being efficient with it.
Bruno and I have talked about irrigation efficiency at length. So there is some recorded seminars of ours that maybe you can look up or you can call us. But there are a lot of practices, again, like measuring pressure, not mismatch irrigation heads. Bruno talked about irrigation interception efficiency, having your pots close to each other, because if there is space in between the pots, then water from the sprinklers fall where there is no pots. And obviously it's a trade-off with labor, right? Because then you need to send workers to space them out later, and logistically also because you need some space where to put those additional pots when you space them out later. And again, measuring pressure and making sure that you run the devices at the right pressure. So we're happy to follow up offline, Bruno and I.
Completely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Because we are 1 minute left.
But we could go over if there's.
Oh, sure. If you want to stay,
I was just
later.
going to add too, really important to continuously audit for leaks
Sure.
and things that aren't functioning properly. We do that on a regular basis. It's just a constant. Well, by the time you hit the end of it, you're already back, ready to go back to the beginning. So,
yeah, don't turn the irrigation on with your eyes closed and walk away, right? Like, when you turn it on, go look for problems and fix those problems. When you can. Yeah, there's some research about for landscape irrigation that the majority, 70% of the water that is wasted in landscape irrigation is due to just, malfunctioning equipment and broken sprinkler heads and such. So we can avoid that, and then we can save a lot of water. And Emma has a question. What are the recommendations the officials tend to recommend for nursery BMPs? Who are the officials, Emma? Aren't you an official?
Well, I was asking Jody, which I can talk to her more if she wants me to get more involved. But yeah, I was mostly asking her for the Track 2 folks here in Ventura, if she had any insight into what recommendations people would make for nurseries in this area to, comply with the requirements here. But she just DM'd me and said that she hasn't seen a Track 2 plan yet for a nursery. So I guess we'll stay tuned and see.
What's Track 2?
So Track 2 is basically the option here in Ventura County for folks to Jody, I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher this. You're much better.
No, not at all. It's the implementation focused pathway. So if they don't want to sample, then they instead would implement these management practices and have to work with the technical service provider to make those recommendations. I think the big question, and what I had messaged Emma was like, I haven't seen a plan yet. So I'm not sure what some of those recommendations would be, but also importantly, I'm not sure what the regional board's expectations are going to be in terms of what they're going to approve. But it's also really going to depend on what the constituent is. So are you talking nutrients? Are you talking current pesticides, legacy pesticides? Bacteria is a big one that we're always struggling with. We have bacteria TMDLs. We know we're going to have exceedances. And what is the obligation that growers?
From nurseries?
Sorry, Gerry, what was that?
Well, I'm surprised. I didn't know. I thought typically it's associated with septic tanks and E. coli and all those things. Is it a problem with nurseries too?
It's ag is listed as a responsible party for the bacteria TMDL. So if at any of our agricultural monitoring sites we have exceedances for bacteria, then all of those growers in the area represented by that site are then subject to discharge limitations for bacteria, and then they either have to start sampling for it, or they have to develop a Track 2 management practice plan and do something to mitigate the bacteria. I think the source of where that bacteria is coming from is a big, topic of discussion.
It's associated with the wildlife, like maybe a coyote during the night went there and did their things there.
Background natural sources.
Tomorrow it rained. I see.
Yeah.
And these sampling sites, this is for irrigate lands programs, so they're fairly far down. Well, they're a large catchment. Yeah. So it's hard to pinpoint who the point source is. Right. Which makes it everybody's problem.
But so the requirement for the grower would be like, oh, you need to implement some practices to manage your whatever is the source of your bacteria pollution. Is that, do I understand correctly?
That's right. Yeah. Which is why
Okay.
bacteria is a really tricky one to wrap your head around as to where is it coming from? Can it really be attributed to these agricultural operations? And then what should they be held responsible for doing?
Are there any more questions?
Coyotes are already a problem because they eat the drip line, right? So now if they start pooping all over the place too, then it's a double problem.
Do we have any more questions from the audience? I'll say before we end here, thanks everyone for attending. This is really great. And Gerry and I have done quite a few of these over the last few years.
Reluctantly.
Right. So yeah, we'll have to see who else we can get to participate in these now that Gerry's moving on.
So we're gonna stay online if there are some burning questions. Typically, nobody asks questions during the time, and then after the time, everybody loses their inhibitions and starts talking. So we're here.
So we're good for now, though, right? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get busy on other stuff, but thank you very much, you guys. Really appreciate it. Always
you're
good to
welcome.
see everybody, too.
I've got to run to a different meeting. It's very nice meeting you.
Okay.
Just leave us here. Good to see you,
Yeah.
Sam.
Gotcha. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Sam. There's still quite a few people on. Maybe hopefully someone comes up with some more questions. Oh, Emma's the host now.
So, Chris, to follow up, I've seen people building very small ponds and putting a float and putting a pump and repumping, right? I've like even burying a 1,000 gallons tank because obviously the pond is a problem with digging it. You need to get it engineered because the slope, I mean, you're going to put a lot of water in it, right? So if you have a bank that cannot hold that water, your neighbor is not going to have a sense of humor about you discharging a bunch of sand and water in their property. So it's expensive, right? You need to get an engineer, you need to get a lot of work to dig it. Back in the day, we just used to get the backhoe and dig a big hole, right? But now these days you cannot do those things anymore. And so trying to dodge all these problems. I've seen people here in San Diego, and it was actually with the help of some NRCS engineer, where they built a very small structure that would receive the runoff, and they were just again trying to get rid of it, right? And luckily the regulators in my county, the county of San Diego, they let you do this. It's a very common practice where you collect the water and you repump it on a drip line just to get rid of it. And since there aren't too many people left here in the meeting anymore, now I can say nobody knows and nobody cares and nobody calculates how much flow rate you're applying to the landscape around the property. So if you're over irrigating it and it's some of the runoff now is infiltrating there, nobody knows, right? And so it's this way that we sweep one problem under the rug. But the way that they design it is that they have a very relatively small structure on a float on a float switch that kicks in a pump that starts pumping the runoff on a drip line and uses it up. And so that way, as long as the runoff coming in is not larger than the runoff going out, then you don't need a lot of storage capacity. I don't know if this helps or answers your question.
Yeah, and I've seen things where, ponds that are unlined and they're pumping a little bit of water out of, a lot of it's infiltrating. Um, I've
That's
seen,
right.
I've heard one horror story about someone who didn't design their pond correctly and had their friends with the heavy equipment come, and then it got overtopped and flooded into and washed out into one of our California rivers in the Central Valley, um, and which created all kinds of bigger problems for them, right? And so I think Gerry's absolutely right. Engineer it correctly, and NRCS, is there to provide expertise, that engineering expertise. And that's one of the things they do. So you can look to your local office for help.
And this picture is an example of an unlined pond that, as Bruno says, probably a lot of it infiltrates depending on what kind of soil you have underneath it, and depending on what ground soil you have underground, the water may or may not connect to the aquifer. So depending on how much water use your aquifer has, and obviously in the Central Valley it's all used for drinking, then there will be more or less focus on polluting those groundwater resources. For us in San Diego, the emphasis is not so strong because, like, oh, I'm polluting that water that has got three decibels per meter of salts anyway. So it depends on where you're at a little bit.